Welcome to Back to the Text Themselves, a series on phenomenology. Today we examine Chapter 1 of Heidegger's Being and Time. In this video, I address the following questions. 1. What does it mean for Dasein's essence to lie in its existence? 2. How is Dasein related to its existence? And 3. How is the analytic of Dasein different from anthropology? If you learned something from this video and want to support this work, please consider liking it, sharing it, and subscribing to my channel. Let's begin with the famed but misunderstood line by Heidegger. The essence of Dasein lies in its existence. The traditional understanding of the term essence has to do with what is fundamental or necessary to the identity of something. It's the answer to the question, what is it? The term essence is the translation of the word ousia in Greek and substance in Latin. Plato locates this essence in the otherworldly realm of forms. Aristotle, in contrast, locates it in the individual thing and contrasts it with a thing's accidents, those features that are contingent and can be removed without arousing contradiction. The essence of a touchdown is the football's crossing the plane of the end zone. An accident of a particular touchdown is whether it's scored while catching the ball or someone runs it in. So when Heidegger writes that Dasein's essence lies in its existence, it means that existence is a necessary feature of what makes Dasein what it is. But what then is existence? Here we want to distinguish between existentia and existence. According to Heidegger, existentia is characterized by what is present at hand, something one encounters in the world. It refers to individual beings. Perhaps we can also add another term, which is subsistence. Subsistence means to stand under or to stand still. According to Mineness, it's a manner of existence for abstract universals such as mathematics. The sense of standing under contrasts well with a notion of existence as standing out. For Heidegger, this kind of existence refers to Dasein's awareness of its own being. It's reflecting on its own existence in light of being in general. And so what is essential to Dasein is that it exists, but more specifically that its existence stands out to it as a matter of inquiry and understanding. Though this line by Heidegger resembles the scholastic line, God's essence is his existence, they in fact mean very different things. As it's commonly interpreted, the expression God's essence is his existence means that existence is a necessary dimension of God, that it would be impossible to think of a non-existing God, as doing so would contradict the very meaning of the term God. Putting aside the ambiguities of such an argument, we can see how this formulation differs from Heidegger's, whereby Dasein's existence is not necessary, but what is necessary is its thinking about its own existence. So with God's existence, we're talking about an invariant attribute of a necessary being. With Dasein, we're talking about a necessary activity of a contingent being. Jean-Paul Sartre will take up this line by Heidegger, but restate it in the following proposition. Existence precedes essence. It's a subtle but important difference. Sartre's formulation places existence and essence in opposition to each other, giving priority to one over the other. This for Heidegger represents a metaphysical claim and not fundamental ontology. It simply inverses the traditional roles attributed to essence and existence, and thus the statement remains metaphysical and in fact preserves a certain kind of subjectivism in Heidegger's point of view. So how then is Dasein related to its existence? Whereas metaphysical claims concern essences, what something is, fundamental ontology considers how it's even possible to make such claims. For example, a metaphysical claim may be that a human is a featherless biped or a rational animal. Fundamental ontology, in contrast, asks about the one making such a claim, Dasein, and how it came to inquire into such metaphysical concerns in the first place. In other words, fundamental ontology inquires into the structures of Dasein's existence, what are called existentials. As mentioned in our analysis from the introduction, existentials are contrasted with the metaphysical notion of categories. Categories are fundamental divisions of reality or thought as developed, say, for example, by Aristotle and Kant. They are a priori categories, meaning they are arrived at by reason rather than experience, and so are necessary, non-contingent distinctions. Some common ones include quantity, quality, relation, and modality. We might reframe these into questions such as, how many parts are there in this thing? What is a thing like? What caused this thing to be? What is the status of its existence? So what's the relation between these categories to existentials? Existentials are also a priori and address the necessary structures of Dasein's self-understanding of its being in terms of being in general. This contrasts with the categories which concern beings or individual entities. Existentials are more fundamental for Heidegger, forming the basis for the categories to even be possible. Furthermore, they're arrived at through hermeneutic phenomenology rather than, in the case of categories, through metaphysics. One of those existentials includes the notion of mineness. The German word for mineness has a sense of always being my own. This notion is opposed to what is objectively present and so indifferent to us. The computational hardware of my camera has little importance to me. It's there objectively as a kind of inert technology, but has little bearing on what concerns me right now. What matters to me most, what is most mine, is my existence, and more specifically, the possibilities of my existence. Consequently, Heidegger states we must use the personal pronoun when speaking of Dasein, such as I am, you are. This would contradict how I've been speaking of Dasein up to this point. So as such, when I speak of Dasein from this point forward, I'll try to refer to Dasein with the personal pronoun as well, mostly I and we rather than it. Now, mineness is the condition of possibility for two modes of being, an authentic mode and an inauthentic mode. Authenticity means to belong to oneself. It's a mode of Dasein, a mode of us that is aware of our own existence. Inauthenticity, then, is a mode of Dasein in which we are not aware of our own existence. It's a non-reflective, unquestioning mode identified with the beings of the world, but especially identified with how others see us. We'll say much more about those terms soon. However, we should be clear here that these are not evaluative terms or ethical judgments, despite how they might sound to our ears. Inauthenticity is not a lesser or lower degree of being. Instead, authenticity and inauthenticity are modes of Dasein's being in the world. One mode speaks in such a way as to disclose the truth of being. Another speaks in a manner that hides the truth. Heidegger names the latter idle talk or chatter. For example, when engaging in the pleasantries of small talk, which, to be honest, may not always be that pleasant, I'll ask, "How are you doing?" without perhaps even expecting a response. I'll talk about the weather, what our kids are doing, the latest gossip of famous figures and family members, etc. I talk in such a way as to maintain a certain social lubrication that allows my interactions with others to go smoothly. None of this in itself is bad. In fact, it's an integral feature of our being in the world with others. However, these conversations do not disclose what is meaningful about our existence. They don't confront the big questions. And perhaps where inauthentic or idle chatter gets its negative connotation is where we find it difficult to have any other kind of conversation. In that situation, boredom sets in, faster for some, more than others. It leaves one feeling empty and lost, hungry for something more, something that discloses a more profound truth, one that touches upon our impending deaths. And that's because it's in our anticipation of death that the possibilities within this life may be more fully assumed by us. But this is also probably why I'm not invited to many dinner parties. Let us now consider how this analytic of Dasein is distinguished from those ontic analyses such as one finds with anthropology. The difficulty with such an ontic science is that it takes for granted the ontological foundation of Dasein. As Heidegger uses the term here, anthropology is not about the empirical science most of us are familiar with. Rather, this remains a kind of philosophical investigation. His argument focuses on and argues against philosophers who have developed a particular conception of the human being, such as one that is a rational being, a soul, or a cogito. All of these approaches fail to answer the question concerning the kind of being of this being that we are. This is not a judgment against those approaches in and of themselves, only that they have not addressed what is most fundamental. Heidegger sets out to distinguish everydayness from primitiveness. Our average everydayness is where Dasein is concerned about and immersed in its being, but in a mode that flees from it and forgets it. The analysis of Dasein in its everydayness entails self-reflection of its being in light of that everydayness. Primitive Dasein, in contrast, which might be studied by anthropologists, concerns a kind of absorption in phenomena that lacks this reflective quality. Here, we probably should clarify that the word primitive is not intended to have a negative connotation as it does for present-day readers. Instead, it should be understood as having to do with an original, non-derivative mode of being in the world, uncomplicated by extensive self-interpretation on the part of Dasein. This distinction between everydayness and primitiveness, along with the distinction between the existential, analytic, and ontic sciences such as anthropology, reveals Heidegger's emphasis on the life of thought itself. Despite addressing what sounds like non-philosophical concepts at times, he approaches existence as a matter of philosophical reflection. And such philosophical reflection is attempting to arrive at a more original foundation than what Western philosophy has so far achieved. In the following video, we'll address Chapter 2, in which we consider the concept of being in the world. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, be well.